Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. It is Wednesday again today, and we are back for another confidence convo. We've been away for a while, and we are glad to be back again and back to schedule. This is season 2, episode 9, and this week we are diving into how to remain confident even when triggered. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Davina Maria, and I'm a master coach and founder of the Restore Yourself Method and host of Worthy Women Facebook group. And I help female go getters in their 30s develop unshakable confidence so they can powerfully step into their limitless potential. Over to you, Joanna.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Davina. My name is Joanna Tonkin. I'm a registered psychotherapist and confidence coach. I'm also the founder of the Confidence Formula. Davina and I got together to create this for you because we are obsessed with all things personal development and we strongly believe in the power of learning from one another.
And just to clarify, we are not perfect at being confident all of the time. Like you, we move through our struggles and overcome obstacles and mindsets to continuously improve. So just think of us as guides by your side.
Exactly. And like Davina said, we have a really interesting topic for today, how to remain confident even when triggered. And we know that this can be challenging because triggers can be challenging. But we really wanted to talk about how to stay grounded, how to stay centered and focused in moments of feeling triggered. And so I thought maybe we could start off by just talking a little bit about what triggers are for people that might not know, so we can all get on the same page. Did you have a definition or explanation for triggers that works for you, Davina?
I don't have a definition that is very scientific. I'm sure yours will be a lot more eloquent
You
when
know
you
me
give.
so well.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. For me, a trigger is something that happens before a negative emotion is felt. Um,
Okay.
and I mean, it probably could apply to what people call positive emotions as well. So maybe we can just say it's a situation, um, a stimulus before an emotion is felt. And I think that can happen through your all your senses, your eyes, your touch, your hear, like your ears, everything. But yeah, that's probably my you know everyday person definition.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, right? It's a stimulus, person, place, thing, situation, whatever it is. The only thing I would say would be that contributes to an unwanted, maybe, emotion or an unwanted behavior.
Nice.
Maybe not so
Yeah.
positive, negative, good, and bad, because our emotions are
Mm,
neither nor. But just like an unwanted emotional response or an unwanted behavioral response.
I
So,
love
like, what's an example that you use or that you've seen with your clients about triggers? Do you have kind of
with my clients, most of the examples that I can give are when they have a perception that someone is ignoring them, not talking to them, being mean to them, criticizing them.
mm-hmm.
Normally, that is the kind of the trigger that then brings on some sort of unwanted emotion that they then don't like. Yeah,
Yeah, so like a negative thought, right? This person's judging me, this person doesn't
exactly.
like me, this person thinks I'm not good at my job, or I'm ugly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that, exactly that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think for me as well, when you kind of think of it as a coach, and I guess maybe for yourself as a psychotherapist, I kind of think of it on the other hand as well, the way that you kind of know that you are being triggered is when perhaps you go into like fight, flight,
Hmm.
freeze, fawn. So I think sometimes some people might not relate to the unwanted emotion, but they might feel like they either want to run away or they want to start an argument, they want to fight, or they kind of go into people pleaser mode, or you know, they kind of just freeze and do nothing. And I think
Really?
for me, that's also another way that I kind of would differentiate like what a trigger is, because if you feel like that, maybe you can't necessarily name the emotion that you're feeling, but if you feel one of those things, that could also be a kind of sign that you've been triggered.
Yeah, you're talking about behaviors, right? Fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze, fawn are behaviors, unwanted behaviors that happen when these triggers do happen. And so I guess like one of the most basic ways to talk about triggers and what to do if you're feeling triggered and how to remain confident is really to know your triggers.
Yeah.
Learn what situations, what people, what places, what things kind of contribute to those unwanted emotions and unwanted behaviors. And I think identifying your triggers and learning what they are can really help you stay more grounded, centered,
Yeah.
focused.
100%. Yeah, I think, yeah, the self-awareness and maybe even a little bit of curiosity about, okay, what is it I'm feeling here? Why is it that I'm feeling this? What has caused that? And I know when I did some of my training, a lot of the time the example that's used is that when you're driving along in a car and something runs into the road in front of you, and you've almost got to make a decision as to what you're doing. You're braking, you're swerving, I think it's sort of the same thing. And I think sometimes, even in a real life example, when that does happen and you are driving, sometimes you can also go into like the curiosity mode of, okay, was I driving too fast? Do I need to be careful on this road in future? Is this a new way that I'm coming and I'm not familiar with the route? So I think it kind of really helps as well. When you said to know your triggers, I think it really helps as well to just get really curious about why they are triggering.
Mm-hmm. And why you had that unwanted emotional response or unwanted behavioral response. And that's kind of how we can identify our triggers, is because if something happens that makes us feel anxious and we don't want to feel anxious in that moment, or something happens that makes us feel angry or sad
Yeah.
in that moment and we don't want to feel that way, what is it about the situation? What is it about the person or what they said or what they did that's making us feel that way? And that would be called your trigger.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask as well, because I'm thinking about some clients of mine, and one of the questions that I think would come up is, do you ever think you can get rid of your triggers completely and
Mm.
them just so I think a lot of people when they come into personal development, they feel like they can fix everything. So, oh, I've identified my triggers, I know exactly what's causing it, how do I get rid of it?
Yeah. So, I mean, in a perfect world, which we don't live in, you could say yes, I guess. But I always find, it's more validating and reassuring to know that probably not.
Hmm.
We're human beings. Human beings get triggered. We have unwanted emotional and behavioral responses. We're not going to be perfect, gems of beings all the time.
Yeah.
And often, depending on our energy, and I come back to like the gas tank analogy, like if you have a lot of energy and you're feeling really full, you're probably gonna more likely to behave in a way that's wanted, or emote in a way that's wanted, or express yourself in a way that you feel comfortable with. But if you're feeling really depleted or really burnt out or really tired or really hungry, hangry, right? There's so many reasons why you would have an unwanted emotional or behavioral response, and then you're probably going to behave in a way that you're not super um, into, you don't really enjoy. And
Yeah.
that's just because you were triggered, because you were hungry, or because you had a really bad day, or because you were stuck in traffic, or because someone said something about your appearance you didn't like, or whatever it is. So I don't really think that we can ever be healed from all of our triggers. I mean, the goal of psychotherapy is to heal from some of our triggers or to work through some of our wounding from the past.
Yeah.
But to be completely healed from all of our triggers, I think is pretty wishful thinking. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I completely agree. And I think a lot of people think that healing is fixing and getting rid of. And I actually think there's another perspective to look at healing from, and that's the case of self-acceptance. It's more
Mm,
about, exactly what you said. It's more about knowing yourself, knowing what triggers you, and then when it happens, you don't go into, your inner critic doesn't go wild and start criticizing you. Oh, why did you do that? Why did you say that? You're such an idiot. You kind of get more into a place of, yes, I know that this happens sometimes, And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I've behaved in that way is because I've been triggered. The trigger, is there because of XYZ in my past. I know exactly why it's being caused. And then it's more about accepting that you're not perfect. You're a human and
Mm-hmm.
you're having a human experience. And then kind of doing whatever you need to repair or move forward, with as much self compassion as you possibly can. And then, awaiting the next trigger.
Yep. I love that. I love that. Self acceptance really is the key to it all, right? Having an unwanted emotional or behavioral experience and then being not falling into that shame spiral, which is what you're talking about, or that
Yeah.
self criticism, and really just saying, okay, I am human. I was triggered. I behaved in a way I didn't really approve of. How can I repair the relationship? How can I cope with my emotions that are coming up? What do I need to do to kind of
Yeah.
unwind from this, and taking good care of
Yeah.
ourselves and having self-compassion. I love that part. That was the best. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think a lot of my clients are perfectionists, and I think they want to know all of their triggers completely,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can prepare to be perfect when the trigger happens and then behave in a perfect way. And, as we've just discussed, that is really it's not possible at all.
No.
So, what I wanted to kind of go through next is, are there different types of triggers? Are there different Yeah, is it just one trigger? Is there one thing, or are there different types? And for someone who is a perfectionist, I mean, we've just kind of spoken about self-compassion, but is there anything else that you would suggest for a perfectionist so that they don't kind of get wrapped up in their head with, you know, I've been triggered and I've not behaved in a perfect way?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Anything that you can suggest?
Yeah. So different types of triggers. I mean, I'm not sure if it's answering your question, but there's like feeling an emotion can be a trigger for some people. Certain people, maybe a family member, a friend, can be really triggering for people. A specific
Yes.
place, maybe a place where something bad happened or negative happened as a child, or some place that you feel really uncomfortable or really unsafe, can be triggering. Like you said, different thoughts, having those
Yeah.
unwanted negative thoughts about yourself can be triggering. Different situations can be triggering. So, yeah, I think there's like many different types of triggers, if that
Mm.
answers your question. Is that what you were?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That definitely answers the question.
Yeah. And so I think, again, really knowing your triggers, maybe going through that list and really identifying the people, places, things, situation, thoughts that really create that unwanted behavior or emotion, can be really helpful. And just identifying that for yourself. And then also what you can do with that is, how can I deal with these different triggers? And
Yeah.
one thing that is studied and reported is actually the number one best way to deal with triggers is to avoid them. And I think that's
Interesting.
really interesting because, you know, um, we can put ourselves in situations where the people in our life or the places in our life and situations can make us feel unwanted behaviors, or you could change your lifestyle, you could change your relationships, you can change your daily routine to not be
Mm.
so impacted by triggers. People in the places might not be able to change or might not want to change to help you feel less triggered. So, what could you do to protect yourself from these triggers? And so, one of the things that's reported is actually trying to avoid them. Sometimes it's hard,
Yeah.
if you're at work and this is your coworker that's always triggering you, are you going to quit your job? Maybe, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you remove yourself from hanging out with that coworker or choose a different place in the office to sit if that's possible, right? But like really trying to just kind of avoid those emotional triggers the best you can. And if you can't avoid them, which sometimes is unavoidable, really how to deal with them and really saying, so if being at work next to this coworker really triggers me, makes me feel anxious, what can I do? And maybe you have like a breathing exercise. We do some box breathing or counting down from 5, or we rehearse a phrase to say to this coworker who's always saying comments that are really hurtful, or we remove ourselves from the situation. You go take a break whenever they say something that's triggering, and you go get some water, go to the bathroom, go for a walk, right? So being
Yeah.
really specific on what is the trigger, what is happening, what is the situation, the person, the place, the thing, and then what can I actively do to bring myself down from this emotional trigger if I have to remain in the
Yeah.
situation.
Do you know what? I love what you've just said there about trying to avoid the triggers if you can. And when you first said it, I was a bit like, oh, that sounds a bit like an easy way out. However, just thinking on it and reflecting, I actually like it because it gives you a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So in a moment when you've been triggered, if you have the kind of self-awareness and if you have the kind of capacity to think about it, you can kind of say, right, I know I've been triggered right now. I have a choice. I can either avoid this or I can deal with it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the more choices we have, or the more situations where we feel like we have a choice, I think is super, super helpful, because I feel like sometimes in life there are certain things that are so triggering that you can't adequately deal with them in that moment, and avoidance is possibly the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, maybe in a year's time or 2 years' time, you might be triggered by the same thing again, and you might think, you know what, now I'm ready to deal with it. But you might not be ready to deal with every single trigger in every single circumstance. So yeah, I love that. I love having a choice.
Yeah, I like that word choice. That hits home for me and resonates.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like it's very freeing, isn't it?
yeah, it's empowering, right? To
Mm,
not be stuck in a situation that's going to keep triggering you and continue with this unwanted behavioral or emotional response. It's like I can actually choose to do something different. And one of those things is actually leave the situation, change my routine, change
yeah,
my relationships, right?
yeah, absolutely love that. Love it. When you first said it, I was like, "Ugh," but yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's actually really, really empowering, because yeah, I think a lot of people try and force themselves to process things, and they, you know, they sometimes they take the get out of your comfort zone, you know, as put yourself in situations where you're super uncomfortable and you're triggered, and then get, you know, work through it and it will never happen again. But, you know, as we both know, that is not the way life works. And yeah, I love the second option. I love it.
We only transform and heal when we're ready to do so. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Your second question about perfectionists is interesting. Just kind of thinking on what to tell someone who is a perfectionist who wants to heal from all their triggers.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've struggled with myself, being a perfectionist. I call myself a perfectionist in recovery. One phrase that kind of comes to mind when I think about that is like, I'm human. Humans are
Yeah.
perfectly imperfect. That's just how we are. Can we ever heal completely, like reach this nirvana state? No, probably not. Um, and then like having that validation or self acceptance, self compassion for ourselves.
Yeah.
That nothing that we do is ever going to be perfect. Whose standard of perfect are we even aiming for? Like, is it this
Exactly.
imagined version of perfect that we have in our mind? Is it someone else's version of perfect? Do you want to hold yourself to that standard? How does it feel to hold yourself to that standard? And is that something that you really want to subscribe to? So I think just that's kind of what comes to mind when you ask that question. What comes to mind for you?
A lot of what you've said comes to mind for me, and I would call myself a perfectionist in recovery too. So it massively resonates with me, everything that you've said. And I think one of the things that I kind of tell myself, if I ever get into a situation where I've been triggered and I respond in a way that maybe I wish I hadn't, um, I kind of go into exactly what you said about whose like measure are you working towards, and is this a situation where you feel like you should be doing a certain thing? So I then question myself and I get very curious, as in, have I done what I wanted to do and I feel guilty because I've upset someone, or have I done something I feel like I shouldn't have done because it's not the right thing to do because of someone else's standard, or, you know, conditioning or whatever. So I think I tend to get very, very curious. I'm a very curious person anyway. And I think
Like
I
that.
do try, yeah, I think it's the best way to be. And then I kind of try and get into self acceptance as quickly as possible. So I will always kind of not remove myself from the situation, but try and take like a bird's eye view, and then think, okay, if this was one of your friends and they came to you and they said, this is what happened, this is how I reacted, and I feel ashamed or I feel guilty or I feel bad, what would you say? And a lot of the times when you look at the situation, you can validate that person and say, of course you reacted like that. Because in your mind at the time, you're thinking XYZ, and it's
Mm-hmm.
hurtful, or it's, you know, it's triggering, like it's literally triggering. So of course you're going to react, and you know, you can't be composed all of the time. And I think one of the other things that I would mention is a lot of the time when I feel um, triggered and I feel like I've maybe not reacted in the perfect way, when I do get really curious, I realize that maybe my self care hasn't been at the level it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and I think sometimes when you really think about your life, you think, do you know what? Yeah, for the past week, maybe I've been a little bit on edge. This kind of just tipped
Mm-hmm.
me over, and my self care's not been at the right level. So I've not been topped up to, my cup's not been full, and therefore it's completely understandable. And then you go back into kind of self acceptance, self compassion, and then, yeah, try not to think about it.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Be curious, evaluate the situation, think about, how this could have happened. If there's even a reason, sometimes there's no reason these things happen. Triggers are just triggers, and then they occur. And then
Yeah.
next steps. How can I move forward? What can this experience teach me, right?
Mm.
About myself,
Yeah.
about the future.
Yeah. And I think for me, a trigger is only bad if you make it mean that. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the way that you've just said it, it's just a trigger. I think you've kind of like deprioritized it, you've minimized it. And not in a bad negative way, but in a way of saying, don't give it the meaning that it doesn't need to have. It doesn't need to be this big bad
Exactly.
thing that's, here to kind of ruin your day. It's just a trigger.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool.
I love
Any other
that. I
tips,
love that.
tricks, any other ways to remain confident, sure of yourself, empowered when feeling triggered? Anything else come to mind for today?
I only have one thing, and I've already mentioned it. Self-care, self-care, self-care.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, everything that I think about when you're triggered and you're not maybe responding in the way that you want to be, I think a lot of the time it comes out of um yeah, I think it just comes out of having an empty cup.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, I think you're reacting in that way because your needs are not being met, and the person that needs to meet those needs is you. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, I
Ooh.
would say, yeah, self care all the way. How about
Yeah,
you?
your needs are not being met, and the person that has to meet those needs is you. That is so powerful. Let's just end there. Mic drop.
Yeah, yeah. I always kind of go inward. Yeah, I know we've spoken about this on the podcast so many times about, going in, and yeah, that's how I deal with it. I kind of just think, right, I've been triggered, I've not reacted in the right way. What do I need to do? Self-care. What's my self-care been like? Oh, it's not been great. Well, that's no surprise. No wonder I'm reacting like this. And then I just go off and do loads of self-care.
Amazing. Amazing. Let's do that right now. Let's go do some loads of self care.
I love that. I love that.
Okay.
How do you how would you, if you had one tip that you could give our listeners, how would you kind of self-soothe if you were feeling triggered and you wanted to kind of get back into a confident state?
Mm-hmm. I have two things that I like to do. The first
Hmm.
one, I love to go for walks. If I get
Yeah,
triggered in a situation, in a space with a person, giving myself some space just to kind of decompress, walk it
nice.
off, go for a walk around the block and come back can be really helpful and really soothing for myself.
Yeah.
Another thing is something that I tell myself. I don't have time to give myself a little bit of space.
Hmm.
If someone specifically triggers me, I say to myself something to the effect of, the way that people speak to you, the way that people behave to you is more a reflection of how they feel inside than a reflection of
Yeah.
me. And so that
Yeah.
means if someone had a bad day, they might say a negative, hurtful comment to me. If someone didn't have a bad day, they might not say that negative, hurtful comment. And so the comment about me isn't really about me, it's how they feel inside. And so I often bring myself back to that and just saying, people say hurtful things and do mean things and say critical and judgmental things. And I can either take that in and make it mean something about me, or just say that person probably had a really bad day. That person probably had a really painful life that they speak to people that way. And I don't deserve it, and I will not tolerate it. And I'll probably change my relationship with that person over time if they don't fix that behavior. But I'm not going to personalize how they're feeling inside. It's like them trying to, like, they feel, negative energy on the inside. They're just trying to like spew it out to whoever's going to catch it. And I'm just like, nope, I'm just not going to catch that today. That's not mine to hold on to. You might have said something rude to me, but I know myself better. I know who I am better than those comments that you're throwing at me. And so I'm just going to leave that there and let it float there. You can take it back or whatever, but it's not mine to carry.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I do something similar actually. And what I normally say to myself is, it's not about you. So someone will say something, or they'll react in a way, or they'll behave in a way, and I literally will, like, in my head, I'll think that that's not about you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Those are two really good tips, actually. I think, yeah, if you're feeling triggered and you want some things to do, self-care, go for a walk, and just say to yourself, this is not actually about me. Like, yeah, the way other people behave, out of your control.
Yep, exactly.
I love it. I feel like we could talk about that last bit for a little bit longer, but we have run out of time
Maybe
today.
we will.
We will. Yes, we will. And it's been so great chatting with you on this topic and being back again after such a long break. So we will be back in 2 weeks' time. And for more information on who we are, what we do, and our love of all things confidence and self-development, you can find or follow us from our social media information, which will be posted below in the comments. And if you've liked what you've heard, please feel free to like, share, or subscribe. And we will see you on the next episode.
See you soon.